On April 8th, 2024, an eclipse swept across North America, the last one for 20 years. That's what I heard 6 months ago from my dad, and we immediately thought, we have to go. How can you refuse? The last time in 20 years? Come on. So my dad planned a trip through Texas, and that was all he was thinking about for a while. This trip could have just been the eclipse and then we go home, but it turns out there's a lot more to do in Texas than we initially thought. So what changed from a one-day trip turned into, okay, we need some buffer days because it's going to be super crowded. In those buffer days, what can we do? And then wait, there's other cool stuff over here and I can't choose. And so we ended up doing it all. Here is the story of the Eclipse trip, coming soon to theaters near you. But not really. Both my dad and I were really excited for this, but unlike him, I didn't want to know everything about the trip. He took this really far. He was looking at the fly zones for the area that we're going to. He was learning about eclipses. He knew every restaurant in the small city. He was serious about this. But I just wanted to have a good time and have some unexpected cool things happen. My thought pattern going into this was the eclipse will be cool, and anything else is just an additional cool thing on top of this, which I think is the right mentality. So the day of the departure, April 6th, I knew almost as little about this as you do now. On the plane, I wasn't doing so well. This was a decently long flight, like 4 hours. We were in the middle seat at the back, 2 adults squished next to me, and I'm not doing so well. A waiter comes by and hands me an alcoholic drink. What? Now, in the moment, I thought, oh, he's passing it to me so I can pass it to the window seat guy. And so I try to hand it to him, and then he ends up spilling it. I didn't know what was happening, and it got all over me. It got all over this hat. Still kind of smells like alcohol. But while cleaning that mess up, I used the opportunity to get up and ask my dad for some pain medication, and that makes the rest of the flight go so much smoother. At the end of the flight, it turns out that the window seat guy didn't order a drink, and it was for someone else, and that's why me handing it to him was confusing. I thought he was just trying to put stuff away so he could put it on the tray table, but apparently not. Apparently it was for someone else. That's why it got spilled, and so there's another one ordered, and then that one got to somebody. I don't know, man, it was confusing. I'm just glad that was over. In the airport, my dad tells me that one of the ladies she was sitting next to had Eclipse-themed candy bags that she was going to hand to her, nieces and nephews or something like that. But she had an extra, so she gave one to me. I mean, it was cool. It had Orbit gum, a moon pie, Eclipse gum, Starburst, the whole thing. Now, this made me happy on top of just the candy, because one of the main reasons I was excited to go to the Eclipse trip was to meet cool people and have all these experiences like this. So to have something like this happen before we even leave the airport was reassuring. I don't remember how we got the rental car. I think it was just at the airport. And so we begin one of many car rides that we will be going on from Austin to a small town called Fredericksburg. Now, the first thing that struck me about Texas was how big everything is. The roads are big, the buildings are big. Austin was big. So, you know those highway signs on the side of the road for construction with arrows and stuff? They had a ton of those, but not about construction. Well, I mean, there's a bunch about construction, but about the eclipse. I'll put a picture up. It was kind of hard to get a good picture, but I was like, that's cool. And broke the stereotype of a city not being prepared for an event like this. This trip was the exact opposite. Every possible thing was accounted for, but that's foreshadowing. We drove for about an hour and a half, something like that, and we got dinner along the way at this place called Pius. Here's some pictures just to show you what it's like. As I expected, my dad got a kick out of this, as they say, and the food was okay. Finish that up, keep driving. Eventually we get to Fredericksburg with the Airbnb just on the outskirts of town. From the outside, it looked like a tiny little building with maybe 1 bedroom and rats and stuff. But from the inside, so look at this. That's high quality. It was modern. It was huge. There were 4 or 5 bedrooms and 2 large, nice bathrooms. And so we unpacked, you know the deal. April 7th, the day before the eclipse. For breakfast, we go to the most Texan patriotic place ever. Just to give you some context, they had the American flag on the silverware. Another reason why we came so early was so that we can scope the place out And so that's what we did. There was a park in the city, and we assumed that would be really crowded. But we still checked it out. I don't think words can describe just how many porta potties there were. Just look at this. They are so prepared. Since we figured that place would be so crowded, we found a park about 15 minutes out of town. It had a golf course, it had RV parking, and just a bunch of space. It turns out they were going to have people park on the grass, how the RVs park, I think. They also said they'll be passing out trash bags for everyone. So yeah, crazy prepared. Sadly though, there was an airport next door, and so it was a no-fly zone, but not an official one. For some reason, I think it's a small private airport. Whatever, we'll figure something out. For lunch, you can already tell this is going to be a food-filled trip. For lunch, we went to a fast food place called Sonic. It used to be pretty popular back in my dad's day, and he ate there a lot. So we decided to go there for nostalgia purposes. We both agreed that the food was just okay, but I can admit that it did have a charm to it. Just look it up. Back in the city, we went to a small clothing store, and it turns out they make their own clothes. So there's a custom Eclipse merch, which I got, and a hat, which we'll talk about later. Some time passes somehow, and it becomes dinner. We go to a local pizza place called West End Pizza Co. It was really good. Before this trip, I wasn't much of a pizza person, but now I think I understand it. And along with the food being good, there was a guy playing music on the piano who was singing. I know this is getting into the real nitty-gritty, but my dad noticed that he was playing a song that was going to have a really high note, and my dad was thinking, like, what is he going to do for this? Because this is like some old guy, but he doesn't try to hit it, thankfully, which my dad liked. He was playing a song called Rocket Man by Elton John, and that song got stuck in both of our heads. We listened to it a lot throughout the trip. It was pretty fitting. April 8th, day of the eclipse. I got the name of the park. It's called Lady Bird Johnson Municipal Park. That's a mouthful. We arrived there at 9, just so we have time to set up. We're just chilling around. For lunch, my dad eats at a food truck, and I get a burger from some impromptu park run place, I think. And as we expected, more and more people were arriving. Everybody, including us, pulled their car in, took stuff out of their trunk, and set up their fancy cameras and whatnot. Also, we went to Walmart at some point to get some folding chairs. I think it was on April 7th. And soon enough, someone parked next to us. It was a couple. Their names were Jim and Liz. So naturally, to make it easier to remember their names, I call them Jim Liz. Half the effort. We got along well. They had an Eclipse filter thing for their phones. And in my notes, I say they were seasoned Eclipse junkies. I have a feeling that word will describe me and my dad soon enough. All I'll say is when you're in Spain, do as the Spaniards do. If you know, you know. I figure before we get into the rest of this, I should explain some eclipse terminology. There's 4 stages to an eclipse. First contact, which is when the moon starts covering up the sun. Second contact, when the full eclipse begins, when it's completely covered. Third contact, when the full eclipse ends and the sun starts to reappear, but the moon's not fully off of it yet. And then fourth contact is when the moon completely moves off of the sun and it looks like normal. The first contact happens at 12:14. The beginning of totality happens at 1:32. The ending of totality is 1:35. And fourth contact, the complete eclipse ending, was at 2:55. So about when we were getting lunch was when it began. I should mention that it was pretty cloudy this day, which on one hand meant we couldn't see as much of the eclipse, but on the other hand, it also meant that there were less people there because people were trying to chase the eclipse to get no clouds. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. In my notes from reviewing footage I have, I say that it was getting really noticeably dark at 1:30, so 2 minutes before total eclipse begins. And instead of trying to commentate through this, I'll just show some of the footage. Yeah, it's getting dark.
45 seconds.
Whoa.
Oh, this is great. This is great. Wow. It's cold.
Yeah, it is. It's getting darker.
Yeah. Oh!
Yeah, it is really dark here.
There goes the sun. Like, I hear him way over there. Yeah? Yeah, so you probably see it. Whoa!
It's not just the shadow, it's the yelling that moves across the Earth's surface.
That's cool.
This giant wave reveals. Yeah.
I really hope that captured in the audio.
Moving at 14,000 miles an hour, is it?
Dude, this is...
We're going.
Whoa! Honestly, I think it's more fun having the clouds, because then everybody yells
It's
a
like
bunch.
dramatic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's getting late.
Oh. Aw.
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 That was it.
That was it?
Yeah, it's getting late.
Come on.
That was awesome.
So what are my thoughts?
Yeah, that was cool.
It was cool,
That was cool.
although one thing I do regret is not being in the moment more. While having a recording is nice for this video, it's a really rare event, and I wish I was more present,
That felt like a lot less than 4 minutes.
but you can't really ask for perfection, so.
Okay, we're going to Europe. I gotta get the full...
Going to everyone now.
We didn't get the full experience.
In my notes, I split this up into a bunch of things I remember. First, we're going to start with the sensory information, if you will. It got cold really fast,
It's cold.
and as cold as night. It also got as dark as nighttime.
Yeah, it is really dark here.
I've heard many articles describe an eclipse as a sunset all around you, and that is definitely true. Now, one thing I didn't expect, tons of people across the entire park. It's a very large park, and they're all excited. They're all making noise, and the clouds are moving fast. It meant that some people in the park could see it, and some people couldn't. Now, what happened was
Yeah.
people on the other side of the park that could see it were making a bunch of noise. And that noise slowly got louder until we could see it. How cool is that? Like, that's crazy. I'm almost glad that there were clouds.
Honestly, I think it's more fun having the clouds, because then everybody yells
It's
a
like
bunch.
dramatic.
Yeah.
As far as the camera situation, my dad was planning on flying the drone, but since we can't, he put it on the top of the car pointing at us so he could get our reaction as well as a time lapse. It kind of acted as a remote control camera during totality, as you just saw. I had my phone pointed at me most of the time, and so did my dad for part of it. But man, other people had some crazy cameras. I'm talking like this big just for the lens. But after totality, I just think it's over. I'm still trying to process what just happened. But despite that, I'm already thinking about making a video about it. Why it took so long, I still don't know. But what I do know is that you should not click off yet, because we're just getting started. For dinner, we went to a small Italian restaurant. It was fine. But since we gotta keep going here, on April 9th, it was our last day in Fredericksburg. And I lose my hat. So quickly, we scramble to go get another one before we have to leave. The hat's downstairs. I'm not gonna bother to go get it. Here's a picture. In the morning, we decide to look around, get a good last look at the place before we leave. And I see an ice cream place. It's called Bluebell Ice Cream. It was really good. But again, we gotta keep going. So we pack things up, get in the car, and go to Austin. Again, hour, 30-minute drive, something like that. And we check into the hotel. I'll show you some pictures of it up here. It was really nice. As is usual with my dad, he likes nice hotels. And me too. Back to the food again. For lunch, I went to a bar. Not for drinks, though. I'm still underage. I get a burger. Along with drinks, they have a restaurant, and you can sit at normal tables, but they also had the option to sit at a bar, so of course I had to. I ordered a burger with fries. It was actually really good. This hotel is across the river from most of Austin, and we had some time to kill for today. And so we decided to go to a retro game museum thing. It's just a bunch of collector, hobbyist nerd junk from like the 90s and 80s and 60s and stuff. I played my first pinball game there. Dune was a book series by Frank Herbert. Recently-ish, an adaptation came out, and it was really good. A long time ago, they made a bad adaptation, and so that discouraged a lot of people from making a remake of it because people didn't think it was possible. But then this one massive nerd comes out and directs this amazing banger of a movie. And when the evil executive money people saw that it was a really good and popular movie, they decided to give it even more funding for a second one. And man, it is a good movie. It's called Dune 2. Technically Dune Part 2, but whatever. And we've already watched it like 3 times in IMAX theaters, and so it's just kind of a running joke that we have to watch it. And what do you know? At some like science museum, they have an IMAX screen for watching science movies, but at night they stop showing science movies and just show movies, including Dune 2. And so of course we have to go. They said no pictures. There was a thunderstorm outside, actually. I guess that just happens. It was getting late, so we wrap it up. The next day, we do car boating. This was cool. They had boats that were fitted to look like old cars from the 90s, and it was really cool. We got to go up and down the river and see a bunch of Austin. It was really cool, but again, I wish I didn't record so much. For lunch, we get even more pizza. I forget the exact name, it'll show up here. And again, this pizza was amazing. Oh, you thought we were gonna be Austin for the rest of the day? Nope. After lunch, we head to Seabrook. Now, I kind of knew everything that was happening so far, but at this point, I'm almost as clueless as you. When we arrived, I was surprised to find that all of the houses were 10 feet on the air on stilts, because apparently the bay floods and just kind of goes over. Speaking of the bay, our house was directly off of the water, so we had a really good view. It's a small bay that connects to the Gulf of Mexico. Sorry, no, it's a small bay that connects to a bigger bay that connects to the Gulf of Mexico that connects to the North Atlantic Ocean. These things are complicated. Back at the house, we couldn't find the second floor. It turns out that it was in one of the bedrooms, like around the corner. It's all weird. Oh, also there's like evil, ravenous wild pigs just everywhere, so I guess that's just a Texas thing. In the evening, some family friends come over. I don't know who they are. At some point, we acquire Krispy Kreme donuts and Greek food and have dinner, and it was a good time. We played Uno. After they leave, I show my dad some anime that I've been watching. This actually started in Fredericksburg, but the notes are here, so roll with it. Now, watching anime with a parent figure is always a gamble, and a very uncanny experience in general. After much deliberation on how I should introduce my dad to this medium, I went with a safe one called Villainous Level 99, and he liked it. On April 11th, I see the sun rise over the bay. Now, coming from someone who lives on the West Coast, this was very uncanny. In the morning, we head to the Houston Space Center. Yes, that Houston Space Center, and that Houston Space Center. When we walk inside, there's this touristy building with a bunch of people. There's a mock Apollo lander just kind of hanging there. A bunch of other space stuff. And we take a tram tour. It was fairly uneventful. It's mostly just a transport system to get you to the Saturn V. This was the rocket that brought people to the moon. And it is huge. It's only recently being beaten in size by Starship, which is supposed to take people to Mars. It goes without saying that this rocket was very influential. Now, you might be asking yourself, how is there still one of these lying around? Didn't they blow them all up? Yes, but also no. When they canceled the mission, they were in the middle of making a bunch of rocket parts, and so they decided to just assemble them for the heck of it. And the result is this. But back outside, there is a space shuttle. Now, sadly, this is a mock 1-to-1 scale space shuttle. Lame, I know. But underneath of it is the real modified Boeing plane that transported it. But they modified it again, so when you go inside, it's a little history lesson about that plane. And you can see pictures of it in the air. As you saw from before, the control room from the Apollo missions is in Houston. So, naturally, we took a tour that got us in the control room. Crazy. Technically, we weren't in the control room, we were in the press room, which had a glass screen to the control room, but same thing. And they went through about a 15-minute experience, I guess, about what it was like to be in the control room during the first successful moon landing. It had all the old TVs and blinking buttons and screens and everything. One heck of an experience. For lunch, I got the most goated chicken tenders of all time. I ate like 6 big ones. I wish I could go back. They also had off-brand Dippin' Dots, which tasted the exact same. Don't tell them that, though. Back at the house, they were doing construction across from us, and it was very loud. When I was trying to fall asleep that night, all I heard was... Yeah, and that's it. Overall, it was a really cool trip, and while the Eclipse was the main part of the trip, the real part that I enjoyed, as sappy as it sounds, was meeting new people, eating new food, and hanging out with my dad. As I mentioned, this is the first trip I've had like this, and I hope there will be many more. There's something to be said about having a trip where you don't have to try to go and do cool stuff for cool stuff to happen. When you go to 3 different places throughout a trip, it's really hard to get bored of what's there. But also, most of this ease was due to my dad's months of planning. Either way, it was an amazing trip. That is all. How did this get here?